So here we are for the start of the second round, or actually of the core GT3 league, as qualifying is 3 minutes underway as drivers have started completing their outlap as they're coming round through the chicane after the very long straight after Eau Rouge. We'll have to see where drivers will end up. As we're watching Costiaho here through the right hander nice and clean. So we have a quick look at the table. As you can see, we have Jeffrey, your winner of the last round at Silverstone, I believe it was, ended up winning, which means he's currently leading the standings in the championship. Nickel, Foggy and Ross in P2 and 3rd, the two Scotsmen. I believe they finished 3rd and 4th, however after penalties they ended up coming 2nd and 3rd. Chris and Darren Adams in P4 and 5. You see down the order Lux Pecklash down in P9 with Thomas Blackett in P10. As the driver we're watching now, Costiaho, he's down in P12 currently in the championship. So we have a look at the other end of the table. Alfred Pell in P21. So it looks like at the bottom of the table currently Bob Kendall and Paul McLeod. Paul McLeod making it to this week's race. Unfortunately couldn't make it last week. And Bob Kendall is also here, so hopefully he can score some points. So we head on back to the qualifying action as Itamari currently goes fastest with a 1:16.5. It's a very quick lap by him. One of the quickest on track at the moment. Itamari opting for the R8 LMS. The older model version, unfortunately, not the new R8. So he is currently your provisional leader for qualifying as we just reach over 10 minutes left of the session. Takes it nicely through the chicane. So we come on with your last race winner, Jeffrey Ruskas, who's sitting in P3 with the 217, driving the 650S again. Gets it nicely through the chicane. Gets it clean through the long right-hander. So it looks like Darren Adams goes into P4 with a 217.8. Driving the Apex Predator Racing Z4. His teammate Luca Pecklash just up in front, currently P9 with a 218.9. So we come back with Itamari through the right-left section, even down into the right-hander for the back straight. Very long straight. Lovely roar of that V10 engine from the R8. So it looks like Nickel Foggy comes up into P2 with a 216.8. Nice and clean through Eau Rouge. So we come back with Itamari, very fast through there. So he heads on down through the final chicane. We'll see whether he's able to improve. Nicely out of there. That's Costi in the background getting very out of shape. He is unable to improve, so he's still sitting in P1 as Jeffrey heads to the pits, as it looks like Martin Palm and Michael Curves are now into P3 and P4 with a 0.148. As it looks like Ross goes faster with a 216.6 ahead of his teammate in the 650S with a 216.8, Nickel Foggy. Jeffrey out on his outlap. Martin Palm coming through the final chicane. We'll see whether he's able to improve. He's to find about 3/10 if he's going to gain on Nickel Foggy. No, he's unable to improve this time. Heads back to the pits. Itamari is still your leader Ross pulling off on the long straight after a Rouge, abandoning that flying lap as we're with Nickel Foggy now. Coming through the very fast, curvy section. Lovely shot through there, you can really see the car at work. As he comes on down into the final chicane, we'll have to see whether he's able to improve. Which he does, he goes faster with a 2:16.6, which is faster than his teammate Ross. A battle forming between those two as he pulls off for the end of his lap. And it looks like Itamari is off in the gravel. That's the end of his hot lap. It looks like that's Chris Redmond not being able to put in a very fast lap as of yet. 2:18.1 currently his fastest. However, he is on the medium tyre rather than the soft compound. So we will have to see whether he can improve. It comes down the straight. As he comes on down into the final chicane, we'll have to see whether he's able to improve. Which he is, however, he does not gain any places. He's now only a 2:18. I would expect him to go out onto the soft tyres. So we're watching Michael now as he heads on down into the chicane, sitting P6. Still in the Ferrari from last week. Using all the entry curve there. As it looks like Peo is now into P4 with a 2:16.8. He will need to find a bit of time if he can catch to Ross or Nickel or even Itamari up in the still your leader of the session. So it looks like one of the new entries this week, the orange, white and yellow Nissan GTR of either Eric Botterdink or Paul McLeod, and I believe that was Paul McLeod. So we come with sorry, as we come with Eric in the Nissan GTR, very powerful car, will be very quick down the straight. However, we'll have to see whether he can manage it through the corner. As you see the flames coming out of both sides of the car, getting nicely through that section, nice and smooth. As you see, Lux liveries down on the bottom of the door as well as on the front. The designer of this car, just looking very clean through the straight. Nicely through there as he comes on down into the final chicane. We'll have to see whether he's able to improve. A 2:18.6 currently your fastest time from Eric, which he is able to improve. He goes up to P15 with a 2:18.4. So that looks like his 650S is behind him. As we see Ross on a flying lap, currently 300ths down of his best in qualifying, which is a 2:16.6. So we'll have to see whether he's able to improve. Nice and clean. Gets it nicely through the chicane. We'll have to see whether he's able to improve. Which he does. He goes fastest with a 2:16.3. What a lap by Ross. That was a cracker of a lap. As there's only 2 minutes marking the end of this till the end of the session. That doesn't give drivers a lot of time to finish their hot lap, so we may see Ross starting from the front row of the grid. However, will Itamari be able to improve? As he comes down through Blanchimont. Really hear that engine scream as it comes flying past. Gets it nicely through the first part of the chicane. Nice and clean through the second. Is he able to improve? No, he will have to do it in the next lap. Otherwise, it will be Ross. Ross will be starting from pole unless if one of the other drivers can improve. Come with Ross a little side, Nickel, sorry, a little sideways out of there. As he comes on down into the run through Pouon. So I believe that's Chris Redman behind him, I'm unsure. So we see Martin Palm in P5 with a 2:17.1. He's caught in a bit of traffic, however I believe that is Kostya Ho. It is, so we'll have to see whether that plays an effect. Costi down in P19 with a 2:19.1. Martin in the slipstream popping out to the inside. This may ruin the rest of his hot lap. Dips a wheel slightly, unfortunately running wide, so that has ruined his chances of his hot lap. Do you see Nickel Foggy coming through the left-hander at Blanchimont down into the final chicane? Flames coming out of the back of the 650. No, decides to abandon the lap, unable to improve, as we're here with Itamar Yativ. He seems the most likely driver to be able to take pole position away from Ross. Comes down the long back straight. I have to see whether he's able to improve. So it looks like Chris Redmond finished his lap and he ends up P8, a lot lower than what he would like. As Itamar comes through the final corner, will he be able to improve? No, he finishes in P2 unless another driver can end up in front, as Nickel Foggy. Luca ended up finishing his lap, so he finishes P15. Eric Rotterding and Jeffrey, your final drivers to finish their laps. Jeffrey coming through the final corner. We'll have to see whether he's able to improve, which he does. He ends up P14, knocking Martin and Luca down the grid. Eric unable to improve as well. And Foggy heads back to the pits as well. So that's all your drivers now in the pits. That wraps up qualifying. Ross being your leader coming out of this race, starting from pole position, followed by Itamari, Nickel Foggy, Peo and Martin making up the top 5. Michael Curves in P6. Jeffrey and Chris Redman making up row 4. Darren Adams and Thomas Blackett in P9 and 10. Erwin and Matteo P11 and 12. Hines, Jeffrey, Martin and Luca making up your next 4 drivers. Eric Rotterdink and Felix P17 and 18. Ollie Pegg ended up in front of Costi, actually ending up in P19 with Costi in P20. Nathan Lockie in P21. Pekka and Taylor Lane in 22 and 23. Taylor not getting the best of qualifying results. He won't be very happy with that. Chris Thorpe P24. Bob Kendall P25. Jens Roos P26. Paul McLeod P27. John Loudon P28. And Michael Bourne in P29. So that wraps up qualifying as we go to a short break, and we will join you for the start of round 2 of the Core GT3 League at Spa. And we have returned for the start of the race as the 20-second board has just gone up. As it looks like Peo has unfortunately retired from the start of the race. Unfortunate for him, he was starting P4, however could not get the car started, so he is ending up in P4 as we have 5 red lights. Engine notes begin to rise, and they are off as all drivers get off to a nice and clean start. See, as they all come charging down into the first corner, looking like they all get through nice and cleanly. So there isn't a lot of contact, thankfully, as they all come rushing down into a Rouge. See, they all come charging up. As it looks like Nickel Foggy managed to get the jump on Itamari. He is up into P2 as they all come dashing down this long straight, all side by side. So we'll have to see whether there is any collisions between anyone as they go side by side through the chicane. Multiple drivers side by side as it looks like, I believe that was Martin, front side by side with someone. With all the grid finally filtering out into one by one as it looks like Matteo was looking for a way around Erwin, however not being able to get anything done around the outside. So you're filing down. As it looks like actually Martin Parr managed to get up into P3. Those three drivers managing to build a bit of a gap. So we see further down, as it looked like, I believe that was someone looking for a move up Lucas inside, however not being able to make anything done. As it looks like Taylor Lane has unfortunately disconnected and has retired from the race. So we come on back to Chris Redman looking for a move around Itamari. Just a few seconds separating them as it looks like Matteo managed to get up the inside and Erwin has been punted down the order down into P11 now. As that looks like there's a spinner, I believe that was Jeffrey, unfortunately spinning into the wall. And he has ended up in the middle of the track, thankfully getting out of the way and not being collected by another car. As it looks like Nickel Foggy has had a bit of contact. I'm unsure. However, it does look like he's been punted down the order a bit. No, that's just our timing being slightly off. He is still in P2. As it looked like Martin was looking for a move up the inside. Both the NLR drivers up in the lead in the 650s. As it looks like Chris Redman looks for a move up the inside of Itamari. They are side by side down the old pit straight. They're side by side. Itamari going to have the inside for the first and the last section of Air Rouge. Chris Redman backing out. Wise idea, not a good idea to go side by side through Air Rouge. As it looks like there's a group of these three drivers, Itamari, Chris and Michael, and you have the three leaders of Ross, Nickel and Martin all fighting for the lead. As it looks like Chris Redman is looking for a move up the inside of Itamar, not being close enough to make anything done. Michael not far behind. He will look for a move if one of them makes a mistake. As we focus back on this top battle, Martin putting a lot of pressure on Nickel. Nickel trying to back him up a bit, making sure Ross stays out in front. These drivers are all very close. As it looks like Erwin managed to make a move. Matteo looking for a move up the inside of Erwin, not being close enough to make anything done. As they all come filtering down into Puon. Nice and clean through there. There's a long left-hander. As you see Ross McFarlane still your leader at the moment. Nickel and Martin not that far behind. Chris Redman past Itamar now, so he is up into P4 and Itamar are coming under threat from Michael as they come on down the back straight. As we head on to Luca Peklaj, not having the best of start, is behind his teammate Hines in the Lamborghini. They are all very close between them as they come on down the back straight. As you see Martin Palmer side by side with Nickel Foggy. Nickel opting for the defensive line, will have the inside through the first section, however Martin will have the inside through the second. Martin managing to make the move done, nice and clean. However, may come under threat from Nickel, who has the run out of the corner. May look for a move up the inside, Martin going defensive. Nickel not being able to make a move, so he has to stick behind and may be able to make it done into the chicane after Air Rouge and the big long straight where the slipstream will play a big factor. As we come on down, Pekka coming under threat from Janko as they are side by side down into the run down into Air Rouge, as it looks like Janko is out in front, the Lamborghini being the faster car, enabling him to get it done, as it looks like Nickel Foggy and Martin Palmer side by side down into turn 5, I think that is. As Nickel is slightly sideways, managing to hold it, however, and keeping Martin Palm behind. Driver slightly defensive into the last part of the section, as it looks like Martin Palm does look for a move up the inside, it through the hairpin. Managing to get it done, Nickel giving the place. Looks for a move on the way out of the corner. Not been able to make anything done as of yet. So it looks like Michael managed to get past Itamar as well, so Michael will be chasing down Chris Redman. And Chris Redman will be chasing down these top three bunch. They're spaced out slightly now as we come on down to the battle between Paul McLeod and Ollie Pegg. Paul being stuck on the outside, Ollie Pegg up the inside into P20. As it looks like Michael has been shunted down the Alder. He's run very wide through Puon, I believe that is, and he's been shunted right down into P14, unfortunately. Down into P15, he will have a big battle up in front of him if he wants to get up to the place where he was. As it looks like Pegg managing to make another move on Jens Roos, as Jens Roos comes under threat from Paul McLeod in the GTR. Both of these cars very fast in a straight line, so we'll have to see how that pace affected. Jens backing out and actually losing quite a few places, unfortunately, as we head on back to Martin Front in the Lamborghini this week. He was in the 650 last week, however he's opting for the Lamborghini this week around Spa. So we may be slightly uncomfortable with the car. We'll have to see. Is down in P11, coming under threat from Costi. He makes a move up the inside. Martin will have the inside for the second half of this chicane, as they're side by side down the final straight. Costi will have the inside for the right-hander, as it looks like Janko is looking for a move up the inside, and Felix not far behind him as well, as these two Lamborghinis go side by side through turn 1 as they head on down into Air Rouge. Neither driving backing out as of yet. Martin Front will want to get up in front. He does have the inside. Janko giving the place. Wise idea. Don't want to go side by side into Air Rouge as he comes under threat from Felix Samos, as it looks like Thomas Blackett is side by side with Luca Peklaj. Luca will have the inside for the right-hander. Slightly squeezes Thomas out, however does give him a car width. So we head on down to the battle between these three drivers, as it looks like Michael is right onto the back of Felix Samos now. Felix running slightly wide onto the gravel has allowed Michael to get alongside up the inside. He takes that place nicely and cleanly as he sets his sights for the driver in front, as it looks like Martin gets slightly sideways there out of the corner as they're side by side down into Puon. And still side by side, Janko managing to edge out a lead and has the inside, so he is able to get past. However, Martin comes under threat from Michael now. Michael will have the outside for the first half of this right-left. Decides to give the place. Michael coming under threat from Felix now, as Michael has the inside for the left-hander and gets out in ahead. Martin still in P13 looking for a move back on Janko. Costi building quite a gap now from Janko and Martin. The battle between these two as Michael catches up very quickly to the back of Martin. Just 0.2 seconds separating them now as they come on down through Blanchemont. Nicely through there. Slight bit of curb there by Janko. Fortunately managing to keep it still. Thomas Blackett looking for a move up the inside of Luca, but not being able to make anything done. He may have the run down into turn 1. He does opt for the inside. Luca deciding to drive the racing line isn't close enough to make anything done, as it looks like Michael managed to make a move up the inside of Martin, and Martin coming under threat from Felix. However, Martin managing to make a move up the inside of I believe that was Michael actually as well, as it looks like Felix wants to follow Martin through as well. Not being able to get anything done. Just 0.2 seconds separating these three drivers through a Rouge. Very brave through there as Martin pulls off to the racing line, as Michael will have the inside. Thomas Blackett looking for a move, not being able to be close enough to make anything done. Martin and Michael being side by side. Martin driving defensive. nicely through there. Michael not being close enough to make anything done. So we head on back to your 3 leaders. A bit of a space separating them now, as Nickel Foggy is in P3. 1.2 seconds separating him and Ross. As it actually looks like the driver that was up there, I believe it was one of the Martins, has retired. I'm unsure who it was up there. However, he isn't up there anymore. Eric Rotterdink and Paul McLeod battling each other down in P23 and P24. Both teammates, of course. Paul McLeod giving them a flash. Hopefully going to push together to catch up to Jeffrey up in front as we come on back to Michael Curves catching up to the back of Martin Front. Very close between these two as they head on down to the slow right-hander. Michael not being able to make anything done as of yet as Darren catches up to the back of Itamari, just 0.2 seconds separating them as they come through Blanchimont. Itamari deciding to take the defensive line, however, he has outbroken himself into the chicane. That has allowed Darren Adams to come on back. Itamari having to use the slip road on the inside, which has allowed Darren Adams to get past up into P5. He will look to chase down Chris Redmond up in front, 3 seconds separating them as they come down into the first turn. As we come to Michael and Martin, still side by side. Janko and Costi managing to build a bit of a lead as Costi comes under threat from Janko. Michael looking for a move around the outside. Will he be able to get it done down into Eau Rouge? Yes, he is. As there's these 3 drivers all separated by just a couple of tenths, as well as Janko and Costi separated by 2 tenths. Very close as Martin runs slightly wide on the inside. So it looks like all the drivers are going down in a line, trying to get as much of the slipstream as they can. Michael going slightly defensive. So it looks like Martin may come under threat a bit from Felix Samos in P15. Coming down, Ollie Pegg managing to get past Bob Kendall. As we come on down, Felix Samos slightly breaking himself through the long right-hander. That has allowed Martin a bit of breathing space to catch up to Michael up in front. As your drivers have slightly spaced out now, the closest cap is Costi and Janko. Janko in that very bright Lamborghini. Costi opting for the Z4. The Lamborghini will have the speed in a straight line. However, the Z4 is a good all-rounder. Coming through the right-left section. A bit of a gap separating them now as they head on to their 6th lap. Martin Palm, your leader actually. He managed to get past both Ross and Nickel. Opting for the softer tyre, however, so he will be up in front. As your leader comes on to the 6th lap, Martin Palm, your leader, followed by Ross McFarlane, Nickel Foggy, Chris Redmond and Darren Adams making up your top 5. Itamari Yatif, as that looks like there's a driver going into the pits there. That was Irwin jumping into the pits. Itamari followed by Hines, Luca and Thomas Blackett. Followed by the battle between Janko, Costi and Michael Curves, as well as Martin Front and Felix Amos just behind them. Janko managing to get out in front of Costi as we head to the battle between Luca and his teammate in the Lamborghini Hines. Both drivers driving for the Apex Predator Racing team. So they head on down into the long straight. You see is their teammate Darren Adams up in front of them in P5. Quite a big gap separating these 2 drivers, and Itamari up in front about 6 seconds. As Luca not been able to close the gap enough to make a move. As we head to Costi-Aho, 0.4 seconds separating him and Michael Curves as they come through the right section for the long right-hander. Michael still not being close enough to make anything done. 0.1 seconds separating them now. As they head through the long right-hander. Costi looking to drive his race, try and keep Michael behind as long as he can. Michael wanting to get back up to the front runners where he was before he had a off through this corner. Actually, Puon gets it nicely through there. Lovely sounding car that for a 8 GT3 as it looks like Luca still not been able to make a move past Hines. 0.4 seconds separating them still. As we head on to Paul McLeod and Chris Thorpe. Chris Thorpe in the Ferrari, not being able to get a move past Paul in the GTR. As you see, Bob Kendall has actually caught up to Jeffrey Ruskus. So he will be looking for a move past as we head on back to the battle between Michael and Costi. Michael will have the inside through Blanchimont, managing to get up, and he manages to make the move stick. However, Costi does look for a move up the inside as it looks like Felix Simoes almost into the back of Costi. However, does make the move onto Martin. Martin into P13 now, as it looks like Peg managing to make a move on Matteo as well as Martin front dives into the pits. Costi deciding to go defensive from Felix Simoes. Felix Simoes looking for the drive round the outside. Gets it nicely past and is now into P11 and is chased him down. Michael curves up in front. As you see, Thomas Blackett closing the gap to Luca Peclage. Luca 0.7 seconds separating him and his teammate up in front. Not been able to make anything done as of yet. As you see, Felix Simoes and Costi looking for the slipstream, does have to go to the outside line as Felix goes defensive. Felix holding the line, managing to stay out in front as it looks like Ollie Pegg and Matteo are side by side. Ollie Pegg will have the inside in the Z4, uses a lot of that inside curve to try and avoid a collision there, unfortunately tapping the back of Matteo, having no serious damage done to either driver. As we head on back to Janko and Costi. Janko right behind Costi as he heads down into Puon. As you see, Thomas Blackett managing to really close the gap on Luca. However, will have the outside through turn 1, not being close enough to have the inside through the second half of that little section there. Still 0.3 seconds separating them now. As it looks like Jeffrey managed to get past Jeffrey in the 650S. So we head back to Janko. 0.3 seconds separating him and Costi. Costi very sideways on the exit there. It looks like Janko will have the run up into Blanchimont. Janko getting out in front, the Lamborghini being the faster car as well, enables him to get up into P12. Luca Peclage sitting in P8 in the Z4. You see, sitting nice and comfortably behind his teammate, looking to push with him. However, Thomas Blackett is just behind them. As he's looking for a way past that white, black and green Z4. Been able to make anything done as of yet. Costieho right on the back of Janko. Not been able to make anything done through turn 1. As you see, Thomas Blackett still not being able to close that much of a gap to Luca, so he won't be able to make a move as of yet. As you see, Nickel Foggy 0.8 seconds separating him and the other NLR driver in P2, Ross McFarlane, using all the exit. Martin Palm still on the soft tyre, done a 2:18.6 last lap, and your second place Ross McFarlane did a 2:18.8. So we'll have to see whether he is able to improve, as it looks like Eric is side by side now with Bob Kendall. Eric in the Nissan up the inside through the chicane, does get out in front, which means he will be in front of Bob Kendall, which is a gained place up into P18. Thomas Blackett still not been close enough to make anything done. You see Martin Palm still leading the race. as he comes down into Blanchimont. Very fast through here. That's 250 kilometers an hour. Chucking the car in. 260 kilometers an hour as they head down hard on the brakes into the chicane. Down into the first car, making sure you don't clip the apex, because that can really upset the car as your leader comes onto his 9th lap, or his 10th lap, sorry. Your leader is Martin Palm, followed by Ross McFarlane, closely followed by Nickel Foggy actually. He has managed to really close the gap to Ross, as Chris Redman is P4, with Darren Adams in P5. Itamar, Hines, Luca, Thomas Blackett and Michael Curve making up your top 10. Felix Amos driving comfortably in P11 in the Porsche, followed by Janko. He's just 0.7 seconds behind him, and Kostya in the Z4, as that's Pekka in the Z4 in P14. Another livery done by Lux Liveries, as you see on the side skirt again. Ollie Pegg just behind him, being followed by Jeffrey and Eric Rotterdink in P17. Bob Kendall in P18, as that looks like Matteo has dived into the pits. Jeffrey in P19. Paul McLeod will now be in P20 after Matteo has pitted. Chris Thorpe in P21. Nathan Lockie in P22. With Erwin Jensrus, Martin Front, Michael Bourne and John Loudon making up the rest of the grid. As your drivers have slightly spaced out now. Closest lap is currently Chris Thorpe to Paul McLeod. Chris Thorpe in the 488, Paul McLeod in the GTR. So we'll have to see whether he's able to make a move soon, as he has gained up quite a lot in that braking zone. Paul McLeod using all the curbs. As you see, only 2 drivers using the GTR in this race, Paul McLeod and Eric, both quite low down on the grid in P17 and P20, so we'll have to see whether they can make an improvement or not. Chris Thorpe still just on the back of Paul McLeod. As you see the suspension hard at work as he takes the inside curb nicely. Nice and clean through there as they head on down into the right-left section. Still not being close enough to make a move, as it looks like Itamar is into P6 still, being followed by Hines and Darren Adams up in front. 5 seconds separating him and Darren Adams. Darren Adams on the medium tyre, as Martin Palm is on his 11th lap and is still on the soft tyre compound. Ross, however, has closed the gap quite considerably, about 4/10 that last lap. 2:18.3 for him and a 2:18.7 for Martin Palm. As you see, Nickel Foggy 2:18.8, unfortunately dropping from his teammate up in front. So it looks like Chris Redman is catching to the back of Nickel. 1.6 seconds separating them as they come through the long right-hander. As we come on to the battle between Ollie Pegg and Jeffrey Ruskus. Jeffrey not that far behind Ollie Pegg, as it looks like Chris Thorpe and Paul McLeod are side by side. Chris Thorpe managing to get up in front as Nathan Locke and Paul McLeod are now side by side. No Paul, Nathan deciding to slot in behind as they come on up through Air Rouge. Paul sitting nicely in front, as it looks like Nathan may look for a move into the chicane. No, he's not able to stick with that very fast GTR. As we come on down to Martin Front, who is right behind Jens Roos. Both of these drivers in the Lamborghini. So you can really hear that engine scream. As you see, Ollie Pegg and Jeffrey have caught up to the back of Pekka. Ollie driving a very good race so far. So it looks like he has sustained a bit of rear damage, unfortunately. However, that is not impacting his race much, as he is into P15 and is looking to take P14 from Pekka. So we head on to Luca, who's caught up a lot to Hines. He looks for a move up the inside. Hines will have the inside through the second section of the chicane, as they are side by side down into the turn 1, as it's Peg and Pekka side by side. Peg deciding to slot in behind. So we come on back to Luca and Hines. Luca up the inside through turn 1. Luca managing to get it done, as it looks like Thomas Blackett's got up to the back of these three drivers, as they are very close down into Air Rouge. Just 0.2 seconds separating all three drivers. And it looks like Hines may come under threat from Thomas Blackett. Not being close enough to make anything done. The Lamborghini very fast in a straight line, as it looks like Junko has also dived into the pits. So we come to the battle between Ollie, Peg, Pekka and Jeffrey again. Just 0.1 seconds separating Ollie, Peg and Pekka. Ollie looking for a move up the inside of Pekka down into the chicane, managing to get it done nicely. So that is him up into P13 as we come on down to Thomas Blackett. He is right on the back of Hines through Pouan, as it looks like John Loudon has unfortunately retired from this race. It's unfortunate for him. It's Thomas Blackett, 1.1 seconds separating them now as they come on down into the right-left section. As we come to Jeffrey and Pekka side by side down into Pouan. Jeffrey will have the inside. Jeffrey managing to slide the edge out in front, and he manages to make the move done. As we come to Jeffrey and Bob Kendall. Jeffrey in this McLaren and Bob in the Porsche, as Jeffrey isn't close enough to make anything done. As we head to Matteo in P25 and Jens Roos in P26. Matteo managing to get past. As you see, Hines is still behind Luca, with Thomas Blackett just behind him as well. As Jeffrey has closed the gap to Bob Kendall, 0.2 seconds separating them now, as they come on down through the run up to Blanchimont. Just nothing separating them now actually, as they come on down side by side. Bob will have the inside, managing to get out in front. However, Jeffrey has not backed out. They are still side by side as they head on down into the chicane. Bob decided to take the racing line. Jeffrey did look to the inside, however decides to brake early to avoid a collision. As Jeffrey is still looking for a move past Bob Kendall, as we head on back to Hines and Luca, as the gap has closed quite considerably between those two Apex Predator racing drivers. Still not been able to make anything done as of yet, as we are nearly halfway through the race. Still plenty of positions to be gained from quite a few drivers, as it looks like Michael Curves has caught up to the back of this bunch, so it's now a 4-driver battle for 7th place. Michael Curves lapped a whole second and 8/10 faster than Thomas Blackett last lap. He is on a charge on the medium tyres. Michael managing to have quite a clear gap for the last lap, I would have thought, for him to be able to catch up that quickly, as he is right on the back of Thomas Blackett, right on the back of those exhausts. McLaren opting to use the exhausts in the middle of the rear bumper towards the top of the car. One of the only production cars to do this in this league. Ferrari opting for the more optimal place of below, near the bottom of the rear bumper, as it looks like Thomas Blackett is up the inside of Michael Curves. Michael Curves will look for a move around the outside, not being close enough to make anything done as he dives up into the pits, deciding not to lose that much time to Thomas Blackett, as Darren Adams is in P5 currently in the pits, as his teammate comes past Luca Peklash, as well as his teammate Hines is behind them, as that's Nickel Foggy, still 0.7 seconds separating him and Ross. Did catch up 0.5 seconds last lap. His two drivers out in front, which makes Martin Palm has pitted, and he's in P7 on the soft tyres, as a lot more drivers are now pitting as we reach the halfway mark. Nickel Foggy is still 0.7 seconds behind. Ross McFarlane, both these NLR drivers leading the bunch nicely through Pouhon, as it looks like Felix Samos has unfortunately retired from the race. That is unfortunate for him, he was having quite a good race. As you see, both these drivers, as Nickel Foggy has caught up quite considerably to the back of Ross McFarlane, 0.4 seconds separating them now. Will Nickel look for a move past, or will both these drivers decide to pit at the same time to try and push each other along? As Chris Redmond is 2.8 seconds behind these two drivers. Nice and clean through Blanchimont. 0.3 seconds separating them now, as Nickel Foggy is closing the gap to Ross. Ross may let him past, as Foggy is currently the faster driver out of the two. We'll have to wait and see as we hop on board for a lap with Nickel. There's just 0.4 seconds separating them down. He brakes hard down into second, making sure not to clip the inside wall there. Getting the power down nice and early, making sure the rear end doesn't slip out as they charge down the old straight into Air Rouge. Getting nicely across the first curb, getting it flicked into the right-hander, making sure you don't run too far over that left-hander at the top of the hill. 0.2 seconds separating them now as they come on down past the DRS boards. Really close between these two drivers. Nickel opting to stay behind, wise idea. Last thing these two drivers want is to battle, as Chris Redmond has dived into the pits as they come through the chicane and into the right-hander, down into the long right-hander, down into second gear, delaying the power for as long as you can, making sure you don't run wide, using all the entrance curb there, clipping plenty of inside and using all the exit. Up into fifth, down into Pouhon, down a gear, it's flicking it left into the long double apex left-hander, up into fifth, 0.7 seconds separating them. As that's Martin Front has unfortunately retired from the race. He was driving quite well in that Lamborghini, however has retired. I'm not sure whether that is mechanical damage or what. Nickel comes down to the run into Blanchimont as we come to the battle between Luca and Eric. Eric into P8, hasn't pitted as of yet. Luca has, however, and it's 0.3 seconds separating them now as you see the flames coming out of the side of the GTR. As that's Michael Curves just behind them as well. I would have thought Michael has pitted as well, as it's a similar gap to before the pit stops. So it looks like Luke has picked up a bit of right side damage there. We'll have to see whether that impacts his race, as you see Ollie Pegg and Jeffrey having a big battle into the chicane. Not being able to, Jeffrey actually getting past Ollie Pegg. As we come to Michael Curves, he has got past Luca. Luca may have made a mistake as he has dropped off quite a lot from Eric, as that is Michael Bourne, I believe, in the wall. Yes, and that has caused him to retire from the race, as that's Thomas Blackett into the pits, which has allowed Martin Palm into P4. 10 seconds separating him and Itamar. Itamar hasn't pitted yet, and neither has Nickel and Ross. 26 seconds separating Itamar and Nickel, which results in about a 35-second gap between Nickel and Martin. So we'll have to see whether the pit stop makes a difference, as Nickel has caught up quite a lot to Ross again. As you see, both these drivers taking it nice and steady, making sure they don't end up in a battle, as that could end up disastrous and could cause them to be caught by Itamar. As we come with Paul McLeod, who has been overtaken by Matteo, as we come to Thomas Blackett and Michael Curves. Michael managing to get past Thomas Blackett. Thomas Blackett slots in behind into P9 and is out in front of Luca. As we come towards the back of the field, actually, Chris Thorpe down in P24 is battling for 23rd with Jens Roos as they come on to the run to Blanchimont. Not being close enough to make anything done, and I doubt he is able to make a move into the chicane. So we come back to the battle between Luca and Thomas Blackett. Luca closing that gap quite considerably. Thomas Blackett deciding to drive defensive as they come through the long right-hander. 0.6 seconds separating them now, as it looks like Michael Curves has caught up to the back of Eric Rotterdink. Michael slowly gaining time back to where he lost it in the pits, as it looks like both Ross and Nickel have pitted. So we'll have to see where they come out in relation to Martin and Itamar, and to see whether their overcut has worked, as Itamar also jumps into the pits. As Martin Pump comes through the final corner, it does look like he is out in front, as I believe that's Nickel and Ross both now coming out of the pits. So they are going to slot in just behind Martin Palm. Both drivers opting for the soft tyres. They may be hoping to make it to the end of the race on those tyres. Both drivers very close, as Martin Palm is on the older tyre. So that will mean Ross and Nickel will gain quite a lot of time on them as we come to the battle between Michael and Eric. Eric jumping into the pits, as that's Thomas Blackett behind Michael Curves. Not being able to make anything done as of yet, as we come to the battle between Jeffrey and Nathan. Jeffrey was looking for a move up the inside, but not being close enough to make anything done as of yet. 0.5 seconds separating them still, as that's Nathan into the pits. So after a lot of your pit stops, you have Martin Palm, your current leader, followed by Ross, just 2.2 seconds separating them, and Nickel Foggy in P3. Chris Redman in P4 on the medium tyre in the Porsche. Darren Adams P5. 12 seconds separating him and Chris Redman, so Chris Redman will be quite comfortable there in P4. Itamar Yativ in P6 in the R8, ending up where he is before all the pit stops. Michael back up to P7, 9 seconds separating him and Itamar. So we'll have to see whether he's able to catch up. Hines, Thomas Blackett and Luca making up the rest of your top 10. As the closest battle currently on track is Nathan and Eric. However, there is a second gap separating them. Eric out in front in the GTR in P15. Nickel Foggy still 0.6 seconds in front. Sorry, Ross is 0.9 seconds in front actually now. As you see, Nickel taking it nice and clean through the final corner, hoping that these two can catch up to the back of Martin Palm. As it looked like it was about a 30-second pit stop for both drivers, which has caused Martin to come out in front. So that's Itamar in P6, 6 seconds separating him and Michael. Michael in P7 obviously was pushed by Matt Neal, who isn't here this week, and I believe he got a driver ban for reckless driving last week. However, did push Michael across the finish line when he ran out of fuel. So that's Bob Kendall catching up to the back of Jeffrey. As we come on board with Bob, a lot of gearbox whine, using all that RPM range. Nicely coming down into Blanchimont. As they head down into the final corner, getting a nice slide, slightly up, brakes himself down into first. Won't have the run through the second part of the corner, which will punish his chances on catching driver up in front. Luca catching to the back of Thomas Blackett. As you see, not much separating them now, 0.5 seconds. 0.3 seconds as they come through the long right-hander. Nicely through there, through the left-hander, using all the inside curb. Still not being close enough to make anything done. As we hop on board with one of the Lamborghinis, I'll allow you to hear the scream of that Lamborghini engine, a very iconic engine. As you see him fighting the car through that slippery AstroTurf, as we come back to Ross McFarlane. 1.4 seconds separating him and Martin Palm. Ross on quite a charge, 2:17.6 by him now. I believe that's one of the fastest laps of the race. As Erwin and Bob are nearly side by side, 0.1 seconds. Erwin opting to go to the inside through Pouon. Gets it nicely through there. Erwin on the soft tyre, Bob on the mediums. Bob not being able to make a move back as of yet. Still 0.4 seconds separating them now as they come on through the right left-handers. As we come to Luca, who's still just 0.7, 0.8 seconds behind Thomas Blackett. We'll have to see whether he is able to make it up into P9. As that's Ross has closed a massive gap up to Martin. Martin catching up to a back marker. I believe that is Paul McLeod up in front. Catching him unfortunately mid-corner. Paul getting nicely out of the way. We'll have to see whether Ross is able to get it past as well, which he is. So there's now just 1 second separating these two drivers with about 7 laps left of the race. You see, lovely rear view shot. As you see both these NLR drivers chasing down. Martin might be getting worried as he sees these 650s coming up in his rear view mirror as they come on down through Blanchimont. Come down big long straight. Ross actually catching is in the area of slipstream, just 0.8 seconds separating them now as we come on down to Matteo and Pekka. Matteo opting for the outside, Pekka driving defensive up the inside. Matteo slightly getting out in front and managing to get past as we come to Costi and Janko. Janko up the inside. No, he's not able to get close enough to make it past. As we come to Martin being caught up very quickly by Ross. Ross a lot later on the brakes there. As you see, he was nearly a second faster again. So there's now only 0.8 seconds separating them now, as that's Nickel Foggy just behind as well. Nickel not on quite as much of a charge, did a 2:18.2. Ross really pushing the car to his limits. Really understanding how the car feels and is able to push it through the corners. As there's 0.8 seconds separating them as they come on down through the straight. As we come to Janko through the left-hander, as you see 260 kilometers an hour coming into there. Janko is in the slipstream. Will he look for a move up the inside? No, he's not close enough. Does go down into second gear. Gets it nicely through the first section and through the second as they come on to their 20th lap. Ross still 0.8 seconds separating these two. Ross will have to drive a crazy rest of the race if he's able to catch up. Nickel just behind them as well, so he will have to drive like crazy as well if he wants to catch up to these two. However, he may catch when these two are battling. So that's Ross, 0.6 seconds there. He's a lot faster through Pouon than Martin, it seems. You see, still 0.6 seconds separating them. The McLaren very strong through the corners. However, does lack a bit in the straight line, as it looks like Janko and Costi have gone side by side into the chicane, and Janko managing to get out in front, as that's Luca catching up to the back of Thomas Blackett as well. Just 0.3 seconds separating them now as they come on down into the left-hander. As Ross McFarlane just 0.5 seconds separating them now as they come on down into the chicane to start their 21st lap. Martin still your leader, being followed by Ross McFarlane, being caught very quickly by Ross, unfortunately only being able to gain 0.1 seconds that lap, as Nickel Foggy is just behind him as well, followed by Chris Redmond there in the background, pardon me, and he is just behind him in with 7 seconds difference. Darren Adams in P5 with about 20 seconds separating him and Chris Redmond. Luca 0.4 seconds separating him and Thomas Blackett. We'll have to see whether he is able to gain a place by the end of the race. Kostya-Ho and Janko very close between these two drivers, as it looks like Janko is being able to gain a bit of a lead from Kostya as we head on back to Ross. 0.6 seconds separating them still. You see Ross getting it nice and clean through there, hoping to gain every tenth he can. Luca's still not been able to make a move on Thomas Blackett, as we're still with Ross and Martin the battle for the lead as they are on the 21st lap. 5 more laps left of the race, including the rest of this lap. As you see, 0.4 seconds separating them as it comes through. Pouon getting it nicely turned in, nice and clean through there, using all the exit. Martin Palm using all the exit as well. He gets all caught up quite a bit this lap, as you see just how quickly he gains through that corner, through that mid-speed corner where the McLaren excels. Getting it nicely behind, nearly closing the gap enough to make a move, however isn't close enough, as you see Luca dropping off a bit. Owen and Jeffrey going side by side, Owen going out in front. Both these drivers driving the 650S. So it looks like Owen is out in front, however Jeffrey may look for a move up, down into Rouge as we come on back to this battle for the lead. Ross being able to catch up very quickly, just 0.2 seconds as he looks for a move up the inside. Will he be able to get it done? No, Martin holds on to the inside for the second part, which means Ross isn't up into the lead, however is closing the gap very quickly into turn 1. 0.4 seconds separating them now as they come on down into turn 1. Ross being not close enough to make a move. As you see him, very determined driver, looking for a move past Martin. This will be his first victory in the Core GT3 League. He has had victories before, however, and managed to win the Core Porsche League, the Porsche Cup League. So he's 0.2 seconds now separating him and Martin. As he's in the slipstream, looks for a move up the inside. Will he be able to get it done? They are side by side down into the chicane. Ross hard on the brakes, and he manages to get it done nice and cleanly. Slight bit of contact there between him and Martin. Ross is cleanly through into the lead. He is your current race leader, as that's Nickel Foggy closing the gap as well. 1 second separating him and Martin Palm. Ross may back Martin into Nickel for Nickel to gain another place for a 1-2 finish for these two NLR drivers. Both of them being sponsored by Thrustmaster, as you see the theme of the livery. Nicely through Puon, as it looks like Foggy is being able to catch up to the back of Martin Palm. Which is he nicely down the gears, making sure he doesn't over rev and possibly cause damage to the engine. After all, this is a McLaren, as it looks like Eric is on the back of Ollie Pegg. Ollie Pegg in P14, Eric just behind him, 0.2 seconds separating them. As they come through Eau Rouge, Eric on the soft tyres will have the straight line speed, as well as the run out and the slipstream, so he should be able to at least get alongside down into the chicane. Pegg opting to go defensive, Eric having to back out of that opportunity. However, may have the run out of the corner as we come on back to Nickel Foggy and Martin Palm, 0.7 seconds separating them as they come on to their 23rd lap. Just 3 more laps left of the race. As you see, Nickel Foggy, 0.5 seconds separating them now as they come on down into turn 1. Not in close enough to make anything done as of yet. They head on down into Eau Rouge. Ross building enough of a lead where he can start feeling comfortable, and that's straight across the inside for Nickel. He may get a steward's questioning there for that move, as he has gained a bit of time to Martin. We'll have to wait and see what the stewards say about that. So we come to the battle between Eric Rotterdink and Ollie Pegg. Ollie Pegg out in front in the Z4. He's driven a very good race so far. Eric also driving quite a good race. I think he was down in the 20th position at one point, and has managed to claw his way back up into P15. They are right near each other. Eric right under the rear wing of Ollie Pegg. Ollie Pegg deciding to go defensive. Eric braking slightly later, as both of them run slightly deep. However, Eric is not able to get past, as we head on back to Nickel and Martin Palm. Still 0.8 seconds separating them as they head on down into the slow right-hander. Martin going slightly, nearly dipping a wheel on the grass, using all the exit there, making sure he can get a good run for the run down to Blanchimont. Still 0.7 seconds separating them as we come to the battle between Ollie Pegg and Eric. So we come on board with Eric. Eric opting for the outside. You can just see the speed difference between them. Ollie Pegg going defensive. Eric deciding to stick it on the outside. We'll have the inside for this left-hander. However, Ollie will have the inside for the next right-hander. However, isn't close enough to defend his position. So that means Eric is up into P14. As it looks like Luca is coming under pressure from his teammate Hines in P9. Hines in the Lamborghini, Lux in the BMW Z4. Both of these teammates fighting for position, as it looks like Nickel has closed the gap quite considerably to Martin Palm. Martin may have made a mistake, as he has dropped off 0.4 seconds to Ross. Nickel 0.2 seconds separating them still as they come on down the run in through Eau Rouge down into this long straight. We'll have to see whether Nickel can get past. Martin deciding to go defensive. Nickel using all the slipstream he can. He does have the outside through this first half of the chicane. A little bit of contact there. Slight banging doors as Nickel does drop off and allows Martin to get back out in front. However, 0.3 seconds still separating them. Still plenty, that's 2.1 seconds separating first and second, so Ross has a comfortable lead now. As you see, Foggy's still not backing down from this battle as Ross is caught up to a bit of traffic. We'll have to see whether that causes any commotion for Ross and whether it will potentially prevent Nickel from having an opportunity, as there's 0.2 seconds separating them. Nickel looking for a move up the inside but not being close enough to make anything done. still has to sit behind. As we come to Hines and Luca, they are side by side down into the chicane. Hines getting out in front, Lux letting him pass over. Lux does look for a move up the inside, however doesn't have the inside for the second part as we come back to the battle between Nickel and Martin. 0.1 second separating them as they come on down through the fast left-hander of Blanchimont. They have caught up to a back marker, so we'll have to see, however, this will pay into effect. The back marker does go to the inside. As it looks like Martin has slightly outbroken himself as Nickel will look for him run out of the final turn. Martin not having the speed out of it, Nickel having to opt to the outside line. As you see, they are side by side down into the turn 1. Nickel will have the outside. Martin has the inside to the corner as they come on down side by side down the old pit straight. Nickel getting out in front of Martin, however they're still side by side. Martin sitting down behind, and that means Nickel Foggy is up into P2 as we come on down to the battle between Thomas Blackett and Hines. Thomas up the inside of Hines as they come on down through the right-hander to get onto the run to Blanchimont, as they are still side by side, being followed by Janko as well, also in the Lamborghini. We'll have to see whether he pushes Hines down the straight or what, as it looks like there's a bit of a gap now generating between these three drivers. 0.1 seconds still separating them, as Thomas Blackett's right under the rear ring of Hines. Hines going defensive, Janko looking for a possible move on any of them. It looks like Thomas Blackett does run slightly deep, however will have the inside for the left-hander, and he manages to get past and closes the door on the front of Hines as that gets a little out of shake, nearly colliding with the wall. Great driving there by Hines. That was very close to that wall. As we come on back to the battle between Janko and Thomas Blackett now that Hines has dropped off a bit. We'll have to see whether he can get past and be up into P9. Thomas Blackett still holding on to that 9th position in the McLaren, however is coming under threat from the bright yellow Lamborghini being driven by Janko. Great race by him so far. He's had some good battles, as it looks like Thomas Blackett goes really defensive, however does pull over as he comes into the corner and looks for the more racing line, and there's that very sideways by Janko, managing to hold it. I'm not sure how, but he does, as that's very sideways for Thomas Blackett as well. That means Janko is out in front. That means that Janko is now into P9, and Thomas Blackett will look for a move back up into his 9th position that he's held for a very long time during this race, as your leader Ross McFarlane comes on to his final lap, being followed by Nickel Foggy, 2 seconds separating them, and another 2 seconds to Martin Palm as we come back to the battle between Thomas Blackett and Janko. Thomas Blackett just 0.1 seconds separating him. He decides to go to the outside line, not being close enough to make anything done, so Janko is still in P9. As we come to the battle between Jeffrey and Pekka. Jeffrey up in front of on the back of Pekka, right on that rear wing. We'll have to see whether he can get past Pekka. Going to have to stick his elbows out and make sure his BMW is as wide as he can make it to hold on to his 17th place as we come back to Thomas Blackett and Janko. Janko going to make his car as wide as possible to prevent him coming past as we come back to Jeffrey as he gets up the inside of Pekka and managing to make it done as we come to Kostia, Hope and Jeffrey. Jeffrey right up the rear end of Kosti. Not being close enough to make anything done as of yet as they come on to their final lap. Ross coming through Puan as that's Nickel going very wide through that left-hander. As we come to the battle between Janko and Thomas Blackett, 0.3 seconds separating them as they come on to the final lap. Janko going to have to drive some really good defensive driving and making sure his car is as wide as possible and his elbows as wide as can be, making sure he can use all of the track to prevent Thomas Blackett from coming past. 0.5 seconds separating them as they come up through Air Rouge. As we see Thomas Blackett on board, driving as fast as he can. As you see Jeffrey coming side by side with Kostia Ho. Costi looking like he's sticking behind Jeffrey for now, however we'll see whether he goes for a move up the inside. No, he decides to stay behind as we come back to the battle between Thomas Blackett and Janko. 0.8 seconds separating them now, Janko being allowed a bit of breathing space, Hines just behind them as well. So we'll have to see whether that plays a factor and whether, if Thomas makes a mistake, Hines can capitalise. Now the gap is up to a second as we come to, as that's Ross finishing his final lap, and he is your race victory with Nickel Foggy in second, making it an NLR 1-2. Martin Parham in P3, Chris Redmond coming through the final chicane. That will mean the Black Widow Racing team, consisting of Chris Redmond and Felix, who unfortunately retired. And that's Chris Redmond, I think, actually finished 4th. However, it's saying Darren Adams finished 6th. Itamari in 6th. Michael Curve, unfortunately not being able to catch up, is down in 7th. Luca in 8th currently, unless if he makes a mistake through the final chicane. As you see, Thomas Blackett still 1.1 second separating Janko and Thomas Blackett. Doesn't look like he will be close enough to make a move, which will mean Lux finishes in 8th with Janko 9th. As it looks like he's diving into the pits. I'm unsure why he has driven into the pits, but that has allowed Thomas Blackett to get out in front, and Hines out in front of him as well. I'm not sure whether he may have had a slight miscalculation, as that's Jeffrey in P11. As you see, Eric Rotterding coming in 15th with Ollie Pegg behind him in P16. Unfortunately dropped off from Eric and not being able to make anything done. That's Owen in P16. I believe that's Janko up in front, I'm unsure. However, he's right behind a driver. That might actually be Jens Roos. I'm unsure. Yes, it was. So he ends up in P23. As that's Matteo gone for a spin into, I believe that's the final chicane. I think he may have ran out of fuel actually. I believe he has, as he's sitting there in 6th gear and has gone back to the pits. So that's unfortunate for him. Another driver running out of fuel on the final lap, and that's Bob Kendall in 19th. So your race winner for this week is Ross McFarlane, taking the race victory with his teammate Nickel Foggy in 2nd. Great drive between these two. Martin Palm in P3 with Chris Redmond and Darren Adams making up your top 5. So next week we join you at the Nürburgring GT. We'll see who will make another victory, whether it will be Ross managing to take back-to-back race victories or whether we will have a whole new winner. We will see you next week. Goodbye.